Shannon Swales, When Burnout Becomes Reality podcast creator, producer, host, everything really. A podcast that was born out of my own lived experience of burnout and my desire to connect with people who were or are going through or have gone through burnout and share my own experience. And it's evolved from there to also having guests come on the show and for me to share professional wisdom as to how to navigate this thing we call burnout to help prevent, recover, and really transform and evolve so we don't get burnt out again. So this is When Burnout Becomes Reality podcast. Please note that whilst my guests, some of us work in the burnout field and we are coaches, counselors, therapists in this space, that the information we do provide, the wisdom that we do share, cannot be tailored to meet your personal needs and should not be a replacement of going out there and getting personalized help and support from a professional in burnout for yourself. I can't stress that enough. And please, if you are finding you need immediate counseling, I really encourage to link with your a GP, a doctor, to help you with that. Here in Australia, we also have national telephone and online services, Lifeline 131114. And especially if there is any risk to yourself, if you're feeling suicidal, please contact your local emergency services, your national, I should say. Here in Australia, that is 000, and also Lifeline 131114. With that in mind, please sit back, or if you're someone who listens to your pod while exercising or your commute, whatever you're doing, I hope that you find this episode enlightening and supportive in your journey and your experience with burnout. Take care of yourselves. Bye for now. Hi, and welcome back to When Burnout Becomes Reality, a podcast where we dive into prevention, recovery, and growth from burnout. My name is Shannon Swales, and I am your host. And today we're diving into a particular topic that is dear to my heart and a burnout recovery strategy that I myself use now, but particularly in my burnout experience, but even before that too, and that is mindfulness. We will explore what mindfulness is, which is particularly good for those who are beginners or never dabbled in mindfulness before. But even those who've been doing it for a while, it's always good to go back to the basics and remember what actually mindfulness is. Because sometimes we can get lost in that as we start to practice it and incorporate in our life. We're also going to look at, well, how does it aid burnout recovery and even prevention and growth? So we'll look at some real benefits and where it applies. And we'll get very practical as well. So how you can incorporate it into your life. So for those who are beginners, but also those who are using mindfulness already, you'll get some ideas and advance your skills as well if you're already doing it. So let's get started. So let's begin with the basics. What exactly is mindfulness? Mindfulness is the practice of paying attention to the present moment with openness, so a curiosity, and without judgment. It involves being aware of your thoughts, your feelings, your body sensations, anything that's going on in your mind and body at the time, and the environment around us, what we can see, what we can hear, what we can taste, touch, and smell. I think I've got all the 5 senses there. So think of it as tuning into the here and now rather than getting caught up in past, which often our mind, into our thinking minds, will draw our attention to the past, or getting lost into the future. Again, that's our mind. Has the ability to draw us into the future. Those things are okay. They're not bad things, but mindfulness is about being able to draw us back to the present, to the here and now in a very particular way. As mentioned, open, curious, and non-judgmental. I'm going to give a few examples of what mindfulness looks like and what it doesn't look like. But before we tap into that, I just want to share a bit of the history. Where does mindfulness come from? The roots of mindfulness come from ancient meditation practices, particularly with Buddhism, but it has been adapted to contemporary psychology, into the science of human behavior to help people particularly manage stress and improve well-being. It's about, again, being fully engaged in whatever you are doing, no matter how mundane or complex. And I emphasize the mundane because I just remembered a little memory popped into my mind of when I first started out in mindfulness. And one of the practices I was doing to, be able to be more present and non-judgmental was bringing mindfulness to an everyday chore. And that was washing up. And I don't know about you, but I'm not a fan of chores. And there's a lot of dialogue that goes in my mind. Like, I'd rather be doing anything else but, or my mind will be in work mode thinking about something that I've done or that I need to do. So I was never present. I was definitely mindless in that. So it was quite challenging to bring mindfulness to my chores. But I must say, I'm a lot better at that these days. I'm a lot more present and get a lot more out of it as a result. I still don't like chores. But anyway, we'll get to some ways to practice, later in this episode. But first, let's get to a couple of examples to really understand what mindfulness is and what it isn't. First, imagine you're eating a meal. Being mindfulness means that you're fully immersed and present in that experience of eating. Like, you notice the colors of your food, the textures, the smells. And as you take a bite, you pay attention to the taste and the sensations in your mouth. And as you chew, savoring each flavor and texture. You also notice how the food feels as you swallow and the sensation of that fullness as you continue eating. And throughout the meal, paying attention to what thoughts or feelings may arise. You might notice things like gratitude for the food or enjoyment of the flavors, or maybe not enjoying the flavors. And you're not distracted by or less distracted by your environment. So phone, TV, or other thoughts. You are simply experiencing the act of eating. Now, example of the opposite in this same scenario. So now picture that same meal, but approach mindlessly, which is often what we call the opposite to mindful. So you might be eating quickly, barely tasting your food because you're distracted by your phone or the TV show, or maybe thoughts about what you've got to do next or what happened during the day. You're not really noticing the flavors or textures, and instead you're focused on whatever else is going on externally, or that you're thinking about that happened earlier today. You might find that you finish your meal without really experiencing it, or you might eat more than you intended because you weren't paying attention to your body's signals of fullness. In this state, you're disconnected from that present moment and experience of eating. I just want to say here, by no means when I'm teaching mindfulness or anyone teaching mindfulness that we're saying that mindfulness is good and mindlessness is bad. No, these both are states that we can find ourselves in. They both have their pluses and minuses. They both are states we're in, and it's not about that we have to get rid of being mindless and we need to be always mindful. We just notice that people who are more mindful, and we'll go into this soon, usually reap more benefits. So I just wanted to stress that it's not about saying mindlessness is bad, mindfulness is good. We're just looking at increasing that mindfulness because it has found to be beneficial, as we'll go into soon. Now, I want to just give, for the final parts of this segment of what is mindfulness, I just want to also share some examples that are more related to burnout. So I just want you to imagine a work scenario. So this is some minor burnout, but say you're working on a project that's close to a deadline and you're starting to feel overwhelmed. Being mindful in this situation means taking a moment to pause and breathe. You acknowledge your feelings of stress without judging them. So remember that curiosity. We're simply noticing that they're arising in our body right now. You take a few deep breaths, grounding yourself in that present moment, and then you focus on the tasks one task at a time, paying full attention to what you are doing rather than letting your mind race ahead to the worries of future tasks or not getting it done. You take short breaks to stretch and step outside for some fresh air to give you that energy to keep going, noticing again those sensations in your body and the environment around you. And this mindful approach helps you stay centered, reduce stress, and prevent that burnout from escalating. And also offers you opportunity to problem solve, to reach out for help if you need to, because that mind and body and that nervous system as a result is a lot more settled. Now, the opposite, mindless with the same scenario. So imagine working on that project again. Being mindless would look like pushing yourself to work without breaks, ignoring those body sensations, those signs of exhaustion and stress. You might find yourself multitasking and jumping from one task to the next without really completely, fully finishing any of them. Your mind is filled with those anxious thoughts about not getting it done and all the other deadlines you have, and maybe even the worries of the quality of work that you're producing and that pressure not to pause. You may not notice that you're clenching your jaw or that your shoulders are tense. I don't know about you, but when I was burnt out, I had a lot of shoulder issues because that's what I was doing a lot, which is, our body clenching. When we're stressed, it does that muscle tension. By the end of the day, you're mentally and physically drained, but you feel like you haven't accomplished much. This mindless approach can exacerbate the feelings of burnout and lead to further stress and exhaustion. So just to cap this section, to me, mindfulness is more than a skill we can acquire through practice. I see it as a lens through which we view ourselves, our experiences, feelings, thoughts, sensations, and the world in front of us. I also see it as an attitude in which we can approach our experiences inside and outside of us. And I do see it as a tool that is essential for well-being. So let's now talk about how mindfulness can assist in our recovery from burnout and essentially help us grow and hopefully prevent burnout from reoccurring or, essentially never occurring, of course. There is significant, and I've delved into the research into mindfulness and burnout, and there's a lot of significant evidence to show that it is helpful and has a positive impact on our burnout symptoms. So there is a number of quality studies that, as I mentioned, has investigated mindfulness to help treat burnout across a number of professions, a number of organizational settings, and they have delivered mindfulness training online, face-to-face, one-on-one individual sessions, and in group settings as well. And the majority of studies have found that mindfulness does help with the following. So it does reduce stress. Now, burnout is a chronic stress condition. So if mindfulness can help us reduce stress, it can help prevent that burnout, or of course, treat that burnout. It improves all aspects of burnout. So looking at Maslach's definition of burnout and the characteristics of burnout, these are things like emotional exhaustion, or what I like to call mind, body, and soul fatigue. It reduces the aspect of burnout that we notice in the cynicism, so that negative attitude towards work. That depersonalization, which is the disconnect between ourselves and our work. So some of my clients or people I've spoken to, and even my own experience, it's sort of sometimes like a don't care attitude where there used to be care before, or an apathy, like where there used to be pleasure or excitement drawn from what they do for a living, that is lacking or non-existent. It also has a positive effect. Mindfulness has a positive effect on the other aspects of burnout, like our reduction in professional efficacy. So our confidence in our ability to do what we're trained to do. So mindfulness has been shown to help increase that professional efficacy, and also a sense of achievement that often is lowered when we're in burnout. Studies have also found that mindfulness helps improve self-compassion. A lot of the work I do, and again, my own experience, that one of the things I notice in people who are burnt out is their compassion for self is often not there. There's often instead a very high critical self that often existed prior to the burnout. So not necessarily as a result of the burnout, but often they find that it has certainly become worse since burning out. And again, that was my personal experience too. Other benefits of mindfulness for burnout is increasing compassionate satisfaction. So a lot of people report when they burn out that their satisfaction towards what they do and their compassion in the work that they do for others decreases a lot. So it improves job satisfaction, and it seems to improve compassionate satisfaction. Also helps in general reduce mental distress, reduce those somatic complaints. So what I'm talking about here is physical complaints, because again, with any chronic stress condition, because how stress affects our body, is it muscle tension? So often the burnout shows up in musculoskeletal issues. So, and in other ways too, heart disease, and there's, and gut intestinal issues as well. So has been found to improve those somatic complaints that comes with chronic stress on our body. Also improving overall well-being, emotional resilience, and also helps with the ruminative thinking and increases our flexibility or cognitive flexibility with our thoughts. So being able to observe and let go of our thoughts, not be so attached to our challenging, difficult, or sometimes called negative thinking. So yeah, really helping be able to deal with that ruminative mind. So just a couple of studies I want to draw attention to here is a 2023 study published in the Journal of Occupational Health Psychology found that employees who were engaged in regular mindfulness practice reported lower levels of that emotional exhaustion and that depersonalization, which are key components of burnout, as we just discussed before. And the study concluded that mindfulness-based interventions help by increasing that emotional resilience and reducing stress. And another relevant study published in Mindfulness in 2022 highlighted that mindfulness can improve cognitive flexibility and reduce that rumination, two factors, again, that contribute to burnout. So by fostering a non-judgmental awareness of your thoughts and your feelings, mindfulness helps break that cycle of overthinking and stress. So some pretty powerful stuff that mindfulness can do. So yeah, but something before I leave you on this section to share is that organizational responsibility. I know we're focusing here on a strategy that the individual can use to help reduce their burnout, recover from burnout, but also prevent burnout. But I don't want it to take away from the lens of the importance of the organizational setting and the factors that impact burnout there, because there is a trend of organizations putting in, mindfulness training, out of good intention, most of the time to support the well-being of their staff, but not addressing the other factors. So I just want to stress here, while mindfulness is a valuable tool for individual well-being and stress management, it's crucial to note that it should not be viewed as the only thing to help deal with burnout that is showing up in your employees at the workplace, especially if that you're noticing it's a common trend amongst most of your employees. Organizations must recognize that mindfulness interventions alone cannot address the systemic and structural issues that contribute to employee burnout. Factors such as excessive workloads with no breaks or no, recovery periods, a lack of support, if there's not a supportive working environment, unrealistic expectations, poor work-life balance. They're just some of them that play significant roles in a stressful work environment. And mindfulness for your individuals and employees is not going to make them more resilient to deal with those factors if those factors are constantly going on. They need to be addressed. I can't stress that more. So it's essential for organizations to take a holistic approach to employee well-being. And if need be, because of course organizations aren't the experts in mental health and well-being, employ someone who is, there's plenty out there who are willing and wanting to work with organizations to help them with the structural systemic issues to improve the overall well-being of their staff. So yeah, this includes just some ideas here, implementing practices and policies that address the root causes of workplace stress, providing adequate resources, promoting a supportive and inclusive culture, ensuring fair workloads, and encouraging a healthy work-life balance are critical components of preventing burnout in the workplace. So mindfulness can complement these efforts, and I say complement, by empowering employees with tools to manage stress, but it should be part of a broader strategy to foster a healthy and sustainable work environment. Hi, it's just me. I hope you don't mind this very brief interruption to this episode that you're tuning into. I just wanted to let you know about a free resource that I have to help support your well-being at work. It's called the Build Your Wellbeing at Work workbook, where I share 5 key practices that you can implement every day to help prevent or even recover and grow from burnout. So on my shared screen there, you can see my website, which is www.burnoutspsychologysupport.com. You scroll down to the bottom of the page and you just enter your details there, first and last name and email, which then will subscribe you to the Burnout Psychology Support newsletter. So you'll be first to be informed of things going on in the services I provide, but you'll score yourself that free workbook. So thank you very much for allowing me to come in, drop in, but now back to your episode. Take care of you. Bye for now. Next, I'd like to talk about the different types of psychotherapies that incorporate mindfulness. And the reason I want to provide this information is that if you are an organization or an individual wanting to seek counseling and have mindfulness incorporated in it, it's good to know what therapies are available. So when you're researching, or if you're already working with a therapist, that you can talk to them about whether they offer these different types of therapies. And I should say, not just offer, but they're trained in it. Check on their training. So there's lots of therapies, and I'm not going to be able to talk to all of them, but I've selected a few of the more commonly known ones. So yeah, mindfulness is a key component in various psychotherapies found today, either as a central focus or as an integrated element to enhance the therapeutic process. So yeah, here's an overview of some prominent types of psychotherapies that incorporate mindfulness. The first one that I want to introduce is mindfulness-based stress reduction, or called MBSR for short. So MBSR is a structured program that combines mindfulness meditation, body awareness, yoga, and exploration of patterns of behavior, thinking, feeling, and action to help individuals manage stress, pain, and illness. It was developed by Jon Kabat-Zinn in the 1970s, so it's been around for ages. And MBSR teaches participants to cultivate awareness and acceptance of their experiences, which can reduce symptoms of stress and improve overall well-being. I received some informal training with MBSR when I was working at a psychology clinic that was running a group program that was based on MBSR, but also some acceptance and commitment therapy, which I'll talk to in a second as well. And I found the MBSR components very helpful towards we would measure depression, anxiety, and stress both pre and post the group, people going through the group program. And it certainly made a difference, for some of the participants. We never analyzed the results, so I can't say if there was a significant difference, but definitely people anecdotally reported and certainly on those measures reported a difference. So I particularly, and I still incorporate elements of MBSR in my work with clients as well. Now, another psychotherapy that incorporates mindfulness is, and primarily is mindfulness, or not primarily, integrates it, is mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, or MBCT, which is an adaptation of cognitive therapy that integrates mindfulness practices to prevent the relapse of depression, a psychological condition that can result from burnout. It helps individuals become more aware of their thoughts and their feelings and learn to relate to them in a non-judgmental way by breaking that cycle of the negative thinking. So MBCT can reduce the risk of depressive episodes. Another therapy that incorporates mindfulness is dialectical behavioral therapy, DBT, that is used out there. DBT was developed by Marsha Linehan, and it was originally designed to treat borderline personality disorder, or BPD, but also is used in other conditions involving emotional dysregulation, which is a component of burnout and a lot of other mental health conditions. Mindfulness is one of its core components, teaching clients to focus on the present moment and accept their thoughts and feelings without judgment. This practice helps individuals develop that emotional regulation, also help increase their distress tolerance, and also help with interpersonal effectiveness skills, so those relationship skills. And these are, I've found in my work with clients, are often key elements of burnout recovery and growth. Relationships, communications, those skills, being able to regulate our emotions and being able to tolerate our challenging experiences, both inside of us but outside. So yeah, those DBT can be useful. Now, acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT for short, that I mentioned before, ACT incorporates mindfulness to help individuals accept difficult thoughts and feelings instead of struggling against them. It encourages clients to commit to actions aligned with their values, even in the presence of those uncomfortable emotions and thoughts. So the mindfulness components help clients stay present, engage in their life, rather than avoiding or getting caught up in their thoughts. Now, this therapy, ACT, is a fave of mine. I've been, I was originally started my training in ACT, I think around 2008, and it's been a significant part of my practice since then. Certainly training along the way, mostly with Dr. Russ Harris, who's a predominant international trainer of ACT, but other therapists along the way and supervision. So ACT is one of the therapies which obviously uses mindfulness, as I mentioned, that I use as well. And a lot of other therapists do too. Now, just a few more. Mindfulness-based relapse prevention, or MBRP. This is a treatment program designed for individuals in recovery for substance use disorders. So alcohol, other drugs, prescription, non-prescription, which is not uncommon for people suffering from burnout, that often to cope with stress, we might be utilizing other drugs, including alcohol, to cope. So this MBRP, I think, is important to share with you. So it combines mindfulness practices with traditional relapse prevention strategies by increasing awareness of triggers, cravings, and automatic responses. So it helps individuals make more conscious choices and reduce that risk of relapse. Now, I don't particularly use MBRP, but I worked in substance abuse, particularly nicotine dependence, for 6.5 years. and they're trained. I was trained in a particular model of therapy that was helped with relapse prevention. It wasn't mindfulness based. It was something else. It's called motivational interviewing. I won't go into it here, but those, I feel like, certainly training in relapse prevention is important because in the burnout sphere, because burnout is a cyclic condition. It will reoccur, and it will reoccur if we are not aware of our warning signs, if we haven't done that work on those individual factors that have contributed to burnout, and if we find ourselves in systems or go back to the systems that have those systemic factors, organizational factors that contribute to burnout. Now, if you aren't aware of what those factors are, there are previous episodes that go into those, and I can't remember the number, but it is called Awareness and Hope Beyond Burnout. I go into those things, so I really highly recommend going to that episode to find out what your factors are, to help prevent that relapse. But just knowing here in this episode with mindfulness, that mindfulness can be really helpful in preventing that relapse as well. Another one, mindfulness self-compassion, MSC. This was developed by Kristen Neff and Christopher Germer. It teaches mindfulness and self-compassion skills, and it helps individuals learn to treat themselves with kindness and understanding their common humanity and developing mindful awareness of their experiences. It can be particularly beneficial for those struggling with self-criticism, shame, or low self-esteem. This is one of my faves. I haven't been formally trained in this, but I have informally, read Christopher Germer and Kristen Neff's work and worked through their exercises and their practices and attended some online webinars or watched them as well. I particularly find compassion-based therapies combined with mindfulness really useful because a lot of people I see, and again, including myself in my experience of burnout, self-criticism and shame were very big, and low self-esteem, low self-efficacy, belief in self were huge components for me and for others. So the mindfulness, self-compassion, and this next and last one I'm going to share are really important therapies to have on board when you're addressing those issues. So the last one is compassion focused therapy, or CFT. Now, this is a psychological approach that was developed by Dr. Paul Gilbert. He incorporates mindfulness with the cultivation of compassion to address issues like shame, self-criticism, and emotional difficulties. So CFT is particularly beneficial for individuals who struggle with those harsh self-judgments that I was talking about before, that low self-esteem or low self-efficacy. And again, these often stem from a background of trauma or abuse. So if you're, burnout, a lot of people's burnout can be caused by bullying or harassment or unfair treatment in the workplace, but it also can be trauma that's stemming back to your upbringing as well. And this can be trauma. I know we think of trauma, of those really significant traumatic experiences of abuse, but also can be experiences of neglect from needs that were unmet consistently throughout our upbringing. I won't go into sort of details, and maybe that's a future episode for me to look at, is trauma and burnout. But yeah, just wanted to highlight that there. So CFT uses mindfulness to help individuals become more observant of their inner experiences, again, without that judgment. So instead, curiosity, to create space to develop compassion and kindness towards themselves. So this approach not only aids in reducing the psychological distress, but also promote emotional resilience and well-being. And if you haven't guessed already, it's a fave of mine. It's also one that I started training in. Well, first it was Kristen Neff's working, and later Christopher Germer. which that probably started back in 2012, maybe earlier for me. And then Paul Gilbert's work was probably more 2015, 2016, that I started receiving some training and supervision and incorporating that into my therapeutic approaches with clients where relevant in their journey of burnout recovery and growth. So yeah, it is a fave of mine, and I use it on myself. So how can you start developing mindfulness? It's a journey that begins with small, manageable steps. And here are some practical strategies to help you cultivate mindfulness in your daily life. Start small. I can't stress that enough. Begin with just a few minutes a day, or if you're like me, when I started, it might be a few minutes a week, if that. You don't need to dive into long meditation sessions right away, or as we'll learn in a sec as well, you don't even have to do meditation to learn mindfulness. We'll talk about that in a sec. We can start with brief practices, and it definitely can make it more easier and sustainable too if we do shorten the practices. I've never been someone who can sit and do long meditations. I think the longest I've done is, well, actually I have done long ones, but that was only sustainable for during the program that I went to, and I never went back to it. So I do short practice. I think 10 minutes is the longest that I can sit with, and that's okay. We find what works for us, but whatever you do, start small, and you can gradually build over time to find your max. And because life is life, right? You'll find that, how much you practice each week will depend on what's going on in your life. But some regular practice is good, but start small. You can even choose to focus on the breath. So one of the simplest and most accessible ways to practice mindfulness is by paying attention to your breath. Our breath is always there. So we don't need to do any setup. It's not like gym. We have to get our gym clothes. We have to drive or walk or whatever. Our breath is there. So it's accessible. So this technique can be done anywhere, anytime. And we can, sit comfortably, close our eyes or fix our eyes on a spot and simply observe the sensation of the breath entering and leaving our body, noticing the rise and fall of our chest, the expansion of our ribs in and out, the passing of the oxygen through our nostrils or mouth. And whenever our mind wanders, like our attention, I should say, wanders, it's usually our mind, attention wanders onto our thoughts about what we're doing, or thoughts about something else, or what's going on outside of us. Once we notice we've been distracted, we bring our attention back to observing that breath in that non-judgmental, curious way. And what this practice often does, besides building our mindfulness practice, it helps anchor us in that present moment and can be especially calming during stressful situations. I always kind of feel like it's being in the eye of the storm. Like we can be in a stressful situation, or there's stressful things going on for us. But when we engage in a 5-minute practice or a few minute practice of mindful breathing, it's like we've found ourselves in the eye of a storm. So if anyone knows, and for those who don't, cyclones or hurricanes, as they're called in the Northern Hemisphere, here in the South, we call them cyclones. But so you've got the really high winds and the destructive winds around the peripherals. And then in the middle is this eye where it's really calm and eerie, and highly recommended to still stay inside, because the cyclone, as it moves, the high winds will come back. It hasn't passed yet. Anyway, that is my take on that. Another step is use mindfulness apps. It's very hard to self-guide ourselves when we're first practicing mindfulness. So it's good to have a guide. So what apps provide is, well, we all have a phone right these days. So, I don't know where my phone is, but we can download an app, and there's a variety. There's ones like Headspace, Calm. I use Insight Timer. And there's one called 10% Happier. I haven't used that one, but they provide a variety of guided meditations like the mindfulness of the breath that we just went through, and also often provide some beginner-friendly sessions, some shorter ones, but also more advanced practices as well. And they often have features such as time sessions, so you can find some shorter ones. Also reminders if you're someone who needs some reminding to do your practice, and also some progress tracking as well, which is really essential to help us, build that confidence and notice that progress as well, to help, establish a regular practice. Now, another way to practice mindfulness is mindful moments. So, incorporating mindfulness into your daily activities, which I talked about earlier about my washing up, the chores. So, we can practice, and again, accessibility. We're always doing chores, we're always doing things. So, we can bring mindfulness to that thing. So, we're not, whilst that would take conscious effort, it's not adding to your day. And it's a non-meditative technique as well to build our mindfulness. So that might suit you better. It certainly suited me better when I was learning mindfulness. I found that more helpful. So, for example, when you're eating, as we went through earlier, you pay attention to the colors, the textures, the flavors. You savor each bite. You really notice the sensations of fullness. You notice the feelings and thoughts and sensations that show up, but you observe them curiously. You don't get attached to them. But if your mind wanders, you bring yourself back to that, the being mindful towards eating. And often what the mindful moments do is, again, they help you stay grounded in the present. So really bringing that mindful practice up, that part of it being present, but also, helping you be able to shift attention away from thoughts. And particularly, for a lot of us, our thoughts can actually generate more distress because we're thinking over things that are stressful. So it can really help reduce that distress by really being able to fully pay attention into what you're doing right now. So again, picking something you do every day and bringing mindfulness to that. Could be brushing your teeth, drinking your water, playing with your kids, walking your dogs. I did it on that as well. Now, another great way to practice mindfulness and really great for building up your connection to your body is the body scan meditation. So the body scan is a practice where you bring attention to different parts of your body, usually starting with the toes and moving up to your head. And this technique helps you connect with the bodily sensations and also be able to release tension and cultivate a sense of relaxation. And you can do this practice by lying down, sitting, or even standing. And as you focus on each part of your body, you observe those sensations non-judgmentally, so curiously. It's not about analyzing or making sense of them, but simply observing them, noticing any discomfort or comfort or lack of sensation. And the goal is not to change anything, but to become more aware and present in your body. Now, this is particularly useful because I find, again, a lot of people I work with, and including myself, have lost that connection or maybe never had that connection with their body. And as they cultivate this mindful awareness, they become more aware of their cues in their body of their stress and being more able to put in their coping strategies that they're learning to help mitigate that stress. So again, helping with recovery from burnout, but also prevention. Now, we can also bring mindfulness to our conversations. This practice I used to do in the group program I mentioned earlier that I did that used MBSR and ACT. And it always, people found immensely difficult because they often reported, they're often in their heads, in their thoughts when they are having a conversation with others. So being more mindful was quite a challenge. So this might not be the first practice that you do, but maybe something that you give a go later on as you're developing your mindful practice. Can be really great for our relationships, just saying as well. So being mindful in conversation involves listening attentively to the other person without planning your response while you're speaking. We focus on the words being said, the tone of the voice, and the emotions conveyed. This practice not only enhances your mindfulness, but also improves communication and deepens connection with others. Now, imagine if workplaces, if everyone was cultivating mindfulness and worked in this way, the things we'd pick up and well-being improvements of not just the individual, but the collective as well. Collective mindfulness. Now, I think I alluded to this before. Be patient and compassionate with yourself as you're learning. Developing mindfulness is a skill that takes time and practice. It's normal for your mind to wander or for the practice to feel challenging at times. It was so challenging for me. And even some days, when I'm practicing can be more challenging than others. But regardless of how challenging it is, we can always choose to be patient with ourselves. We can approach ourselves and our practice with compassion. We can remember mindfulness is not about achieving a particular state or outcome. Do not focus on mindfulness having to make you feel better, because it will have the opposite effect. And the reason for that is you're in your mind, you're not in the present. If we're focusing on the outcome, we're looking into the future. But if we're focusing on the present and engaging in that mindfulness practice, whatever rewards you get from that, you'll get from that. But if you're over here in the future, you'll just get what comes from that, which is nothing. We get more from being present, even if it's challenging. So by starting with small steps and integrating mindfulness into your daily routine, you can gradually develop a more mindful and present way of living, and more importantly, non-judgmental, curious, open. This practice not only enhances your well-being, but also provides valuable tools, as we mentioned, for managing stress and navigating those challenges of everyday life, particularly those challenges of when we're burnt out. I want to share now some tips for neurodivergent individuals practicing mindfulness. So practicing mindfulness can be particularly beneficial for neurodivergent individuals, so such as those with autism spectrum disorder, so ASD, or ADHD, or ADD, attention deficit hyperactive disorder, or attention deficit disorder, or sensory processing differences. However, traditional mindfulness practice may need to be adapted to better suit the unique experience and needs of neurodivergent people. So here are some tips to help make mindfulness more accessible and effective if you are neurodivergent. And keep listening if you are neurotypical, because some of these might be useful adaptations for yourself as well. I found that with myself, although I do identify, I don't have a diagnosis, but do identify with sensory processing differences. So start with short, simple practices. So neurodivergent individuals may find it challenging to maintain attention for long periods. Notice this particularly with people with ADHD. So start with very short mindfulness exercise, just 1 to 3 minutes, and gradually increase or stay there if that is your max. But gradually increase the time as you feel comfortable. Even brief moments of mindfulness can be impactful. One that I use quite constantly with clients: choose sensory-friendly practices. And I use this myself as well. Traditional mindfulness practices like meditation can sometimes be uncomfortable or overstimulating. So instead, consider practices that are more attuned to your sensory preferences. For instance, walking meditations, I particularly find this one useful, or focusing on calming sensory experiences such as listening to soft music or nature sounds can be soothing. That's one I've found with a lot of clients as an adaptation that we use, is using music. Also, another tip is use movement-based mindfulness. For individuals with ADHD or those who find it difficult to sit still, incorporating movement can be hugely helpful. I do this one all the time. So practices like yoga or Tai Chi, or escapes my mind, this other one, or mindful stretching, allow for physical activity while cultivating mindfulness. Even simple activities like mindful walking or dancing can integrate movement with awareness. So I think we were talking about earlier, mindful moments. We can bring mindfulness to anything we do. So, sorry, my nose. So we can bring mindfulness to, dancing or walking or anything that we're doing that's movement. Another tip is visual and tactile anchors. So some neurodivergent individuals may find it easier to focus on visual or tactile stimuli, so something that they can touch rather than the breath. So you can use objects like a smooth stone or a piece of fabric. And I remember memory came to mind then of a client using a piece of fabric to help center her, or a fidget toy as an anchor for your attention. So focusing on that texture or the weight or the temperature of that object that you're using to stay present. Another useful tip is structured and guided practices. So using guided mindfulness practice available through apps or recordings can provide that structure and support that sometimes that we need. This particularly might be useful for autistic people as well, making it easier to follow along. Look for guides that use clear, concise instructions, and consider experimenting with different voices and styles to find what feels most comfortable to your body and mind. Practicing self-compassion, as we mentioned before. So with neurodivergent individuals, they may experience self-criticism or frustration more than others. So, and particularly during their mindfulness practice. So especially if concentration, focusing is difficult. So it's essential to approach mindfulness with self-compassion, acknowledging that everyone's experience is unique and it's okay to struggle with it. Doesn't mean that you're bad at it. It's not about that. It's just going to maybe take some time and experimentation to find what's right for you. So being kind for yourself will help you move through that struggle better than beating yourself up, which will only contribute to the struggle. Mindfulness in everyday activities that we mentioned before. So mindfulness doesn't have to be limited to that formal meditation. So for neurodivergent individuals, integrating mindfulness into everyday activities can be very accessible and practical. So being focused on during routine tasks like brushing your teeth, cooking, or even playing a game. So paying attention to those sensations, actions, and surroundings during those moments. Setting realistic expectations, and I think this goes for neurotypical and neurodivergent people. Mindfulness is a skill that develops over time, and it's okay if it doesn't feel easy or right straight away. Set realistic expectations and be patient with the process. It's not about achieving perfection, because perfection doesn't exist, and anyone who says it does, I disagree with wholeheartedly. I think perfection only breeds distress and destruction. So it's not about achieving perfection. Focus, but rather exploring what works best for you right now. Because what might work for you best right now will be different tomorrow, different next week, different next month, different next year, different in 10 years. We are not the same person every day, so our practice is not going to be the same every day. And that's okay. Go with the flow. Don't be rigid or try to step away from the rigidness. Is that a word? Rigidity. Explore different types of mindfulness practices. We've talked about this, and again, this is great for neurotypical and neurodivergent. Experiment, there's the body scan, mindfulness of breath, mindful movements, mindfulness of everyday activities, loving and kindness meditations, mindful eating. There's so much out there. Experiment with it. Find what resonates for you right now. And if you're finding you're getting bored of your practice or wanting to try something new, go back to those resources and find something else. And consider professional guidance is the last one. And again, goes for both neurotypical, neurodivergent. If you're struggling with mindfulness practices, consider seeking guidance from a therapist or counselor who is trained in mindfulness. And if you are neurodivergent, who have training and understanding in that area as well. So they can provide that personal guidance to help you in your mindfulness practice till you're able to go about it yourself. So yeah, just last bit in this section, remember mindfulness is a personal journey, and what works for one person may not work for another. It's about finding what helps you feel more grounded, more aware, more connected with yourself and your environment, more at peace in the moment, even if the storm is around. being open to exploring different approaches and give yourself permission to adapt practices to suit your unique neurodivergent or neurotypical experience. Hi there, just dropping by in the middle of your episode. I know that is really rude, but I wanted to share with you because it gets mentioned here and there. My book, When Burnouts, Nothing Left to Give, a psychologist's path back from burnout. This is basically a year's worth of my journal entries that I kept when I was burnt out and made the commitment to overhaul my life, basically to undo the things that got me there in the first place. So things like perfectionism, achievement focus, people pleaser, no boundaries, very good at helping others, but not very good at allowing help in or taking care of myself. So I've also included wellness practices, so the things that I was doing to help step me forward. So this is my book. It's available on Amazon, but also other online retail bookstores. I will leave the links in the show note. But thank you very much for this intrusion. Now back to your episode. Bye. Now I'd like to put mindfulness into practice. And if you're new to mindfulness, I'll guide you through a short exercise focusing on the senses. But even if you're not new to mindfulness, it might be lovely just to do this practice together and explore it. But I also have on my website, www.burnoutspsychologysupport.com/resources, I have a mindfulness check-in exercise that you can download or stream. And this one's more advanced and work yourself up to if you're a beginner. This one brings mindfulness to a check-in. We're checking in with what am I feeling? What am I thinking? What's going on in my body? Just really building self-awareness, mindful self-awareness. So being present, non-judgmental, open and curious to what's showing up. Now, I feel this is more of an advanced practice because turning to our thoughts and feelings and sensations can be quite fear-provoking, quite anxiety, stress-provoking, especially if we've been one who has avoided consciously or unconsciously our difficult inner experiences for a long time. So if you, or we've just become quite detached from our experiences. So that one is one to work up to for that reason. And if you're finding that a struggle, certainly recommend professional support, because that avoidance behavior, which a lot of us can get locked in, can be quite a difficult one to change and shift on our own. So yeah, just some warnings there on that mindfulness check-in. Really do recommend it for those who are advanced in their mindfulness training, who have done some work around facing their inner experiences, particularly their difficult feelings and thoughts and body sensations. The mindful check-in on my website is an excellent one, if I do say so myself. I draw on the compassion focus therapy, CFT mindful check-in there. So I've developed or utilized their script there. So Dr. Paul Gilbert. But the one I want to do now is a really lovely beginner's meditation or to help cultivate mindfulness. And it's the mindfulness of the 5 senses. So I invite you to come along with me with this. It's just a short one. I'll keep it to like no longer than 5 minutes. So yeah, let's start by finding a comfortable position. So usually we recommend when you're a beginner in mindfulness to be in a seating position with your feet flat on the floor, and rolling those shoulders up and back to make sure that your back and your abs or your back is supported, but your abs are activated, and that your neck is in a good position, so you're not putting any strain on it. And having your arms either by your side or just, I like to do this in my lap. That's just the way I do it. But either gently closing your eyes or fixing your eyes on a spot in front of you, just to help reduce that distraction that can occur. So yeah, just finding that comfortable position. So feet on the floor, Roll those shoulders up and back. Activate those abs. Support the back. Make sure that neck is in a good alignment. Close those eyes. Fix those eyes on a spot in front of you. And just invite you to take a deep breath in through your nose and exhale through your mouth. Maybe doing a couple more of those in through the nose and out through the mouth. Just helping your body come into this moment and your mind. And now I encourage you to shift your attention to the sounds in your environment. Notice the sounds around you. Are there any distant noises or the hum of appliances? And if your mind wanders, and it will, if your attention has gone to your thoughts about this activity or thoughts about other things, just note where it went, and when you can, gently bring yourself to noticing the sounds in your environment. Next, shift your attention to touch. Pay attention to sensations in your body. Maybe feel the surface you're resting on, or the contact of your clothes on your skin. Observing with a gentle curiosity, letting go of any judgments or comparisons or analysis, just simply observing the feel of touch in this moment. Next, shift your attention to sight. So open your eyes if yours are closed and look around your space and notice any colors or shapes or light in your surroundings. Again, observing and not judging. And if your attention wanders onto judgments or analysis or other distractions, just note where it went and gently bring yourself back to observing what you see. A bit like ticking things off a list, but allowing that list to appear, to fall on your attention. Yellow walls, iron, laptop. Close your eyes or fix your eyes on a spot once again and tune in your attention to smells in your environment. And if you can't smell anything, just notice the absence of smell. Again, just observing, allowing that smell to fall on your awareness. Being open and curious, letting go of judgments or analysis. And last but not least, shift your attention to taste. Noticing if you've had something to eat or drink, just noticing the flavors and textures, or maybe the absence of taste. And slowly bring your awareness back to your breath, just noticing your breath without a need to change it this time. Resting your attention on your breath in the here and now. Just noticing how you're feeling right now. And when you're ready, opening your eyes or refocusing your attention on your space. Welcome back. I just want to take a moment to reflect on your mindful practice there. And reflection is a really important component of mindful practice. So these questions I'm going to ask you, I really encourage you to do so with your other mindful practices that you engage in from here. So, first of all, what did you notice during your practice? Were there any particular thoughts or feelings or sensations that stood out for you? What aspects did you find challenging? Were there moments when maintaining focus was difficult? Were there any differences between the senses? And how present were you? Were you able to engage in that present moment and be able to let go of those judgments, analysis, or comparisons? Maybe this fluctuated throughout the practice, or maybe the whole time you weren't present, and that's okay too. We all start somewhere. Just noticing without judgment, and just openness to how present were you during that practice. And what distractions did you encounter? So were there external things like sound sometimes, or noises, or other things that you found your attention grabbed hold of, or maybe internal experiences like those judgments, or that pulled your attention away? And again, totally normal and okay. Just noticing, that's information for you. What tends to draw your attention away. We get better at being observing of that and being able to become more present. We all have our patterns of attention distraction. So keeping track of mindfulness practice can help you observe your progress and recognize improvements in your ability to be present without judgment. Remember, the goal of mindfulness is not to seek immediate relief or feel better, but to cultivate a state of curiosity and awareness. And mindfulness is about becoming more present and engaged with your experiences. While it won't prevent difficult events or emotions, it equips you to respond to them with greater awareness and effectiveness. By developing the mindful practice, you can approach the challenges with a clearer perspective and take actions that support both yourself and the situation more constructively. Just to end this episode, I want to share some resources to support your mindfulness practice, some that I've mentioned already throughout our episode. But if you want to dive deeper into mindfulness, here are some resources that might help. So books that I recommend: The Miracle of Mindfulness by, I can't pronounce this, Thich Nhat Hanh. And Wherever You Go, There You Are, Jon Kabat-Zinn. Apps, as mentioned earlier, Headspace and Calm are great for guided meditations. Insight Timer also offers a wide range of free meditations as well. A website to check out that has a lot of information on mindfulness and practices and worksheets, etc., is mindful.org. And of course, as I've mentioned, seeking therapy from a mindfulness practitioner can be very useful as well. It's something that I work on and do with my clients, and I work with, because of my registration, I do work only with Australian citizens, or Australians, people residing in Australia. And I do both telehealth across Australia and also in Brisbane on site, in North Brisbane. So yeah, if that works for you and you want to work on your mindfulness skills, please get in touch. My details are in the show notes. So that's it from me today. I hope you found this introduction to mindfulness helpful and inspired to give it a try to help support your recovery or growth or prevention of burnout. And just another reminder, mindfulness is a practice, and like any skill, it takes time and patience. But thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you next time on When Burnout Becomes Reality. Me again. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to this episode of When Burnout Becomes Reality podcast. I do hope that you have gained some insight, wisdom, or taking away something from this episode that is helpful for you with wherever you're at in your burnout journey, or helping others with. Please also reach out. I'd love to hear from the listeners, the viewers, to find out what you're finding helpful, maybe what you still would like to know. So please don't hesitate to follow, subscribe, comment, review, like, shoot me an email. I have my details in the show notes. And if you are in need of services around burnout and you are an Australian citizen, I, in my business, Burnout Psychology Support, do offer group and individual services, telehealth, as well as in-person in Brisbane. So again, check out the show notes. I have my contact details, but the best thing to do is jump on my website at www.burnoutspsychologysupport.com. And just a reminder, of course, to reach out for personalized help. This podcast, whilst we strive to deliver information that can be supportive and educational for you, it is not tailored to meet your personal needs. And burnout is very individualized in terms of what gets us into burnout and what helps support us in getting out. So please do seek professional support. And I think that is it for me to share with you. Thank you once again, and take care of you. Bye for now.